It has frustrated me reading the comments on Facebook, on YouTube, on Reddit, all over the place about how people just don't understand why he would go back to this older man. And I very much would want to empower Donny, because I would ask, okay, what does it feel like? What does that look like? If I was giving Baby Reindeer therapy, this is what I would do. Well, for starters, I would definitely not be calling him Baby Reindeer in sessions. I would be calling him by his first name, whether it's Donny the character or Richard, the person who Baby Reindeer is based off. But first, hello, welcome to my channel. I'm Sam and I'm an Australian-based online therapist for introverts, empaths, gentle souls and INFJs. Talking about things like Baby Reindeer is not my usual style of a video, but I've been so captivated by this story, and my last video on Baby Reindeer just took off for me and my channel that I felt like I just needed to talk about it. Just one more video. Okay, let's get into what we're all here for. For the purpose of this video on how I would do therapy with Donny, I'm going to assume that I haven't seen the show, I don't know his story. All I know is this man has come to me for counselling, he's going through something and he wants to work on himself. Very much in the first session, it would be all about building rapport, building that trust between us. For anybody who has gone through trauma, like Donny, they are often people who they've had their trust stolen from them. Wow, that's a really loud bird. They've had their trust taken from them. It's been stolen. They don't know who's in their corner. They don't know who they can turn to. They don't know who they can trust some of the most vulnerable parts of their story to. And so with people like that, I find that their story of trauma generally does not come out in the first session. Don't get me wrong, it can, but I could imagine for somebody like Donny and with his personality type, it would probably take a few sessions to really get into the nitty-gritty. And in terms of what happened to him with the older man, I would imagine that wouldn't come out until much later. I feel like with someone like Donny, it would probably start with the story of Martha Scott and then the questioning of his sexuality before it even got to the trauma that happened 5 years earlier. They say that 80% of the most effective counselling comes through the relationship and the trust that is built between the client and the therapist. You could have a client go in and see, you know, the world's most renowned therapist, but if they don't have that rapport, if they don't feel like they can really open up, take their mask off, be free to talk about themselves, then the effectiveness of counselling is it's not going to be that effective, let's be honest. And so for me, I find it's really important that I need to help the clients feel comfortable. I understand that they need to see that they can trust me with their story. And so that's very much what I would be doing with Donny in this instance. In this first session, I would also be learning more about what Donny's learning style is. Some people learn by visuals, some learn by using their hands, some it's reading, some it's just hearing, and for others it's them talking out loud, which is very much talk therapy. We would probably, depending on how the session is going and how much Donny is opening up, we would be establishing what his support networks are. Does he have friends that support him? What about his family? What are some of his coping strategies? Does he know how to self-regulate? And we would be figuring all of this out, figuring out what his safety plan is. And if I felt like he needed some extra tools in his tool belt to help self-regulate, to help, you know, figure out his shit when things are hard, we would be very much talking through that. I would be giving him some grounding exercises, meditation, the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I would be talking with him and giving him psychoeducation on things like the window of tolerance and talking about the fight, flight, freeze mode. Eventually, with psychoeducation, depending on when his story of trauma comes up, we would be learning about trauma and the body and how it affects the body, and learning about the steps to take to feel safe and connected back into your body. Because for people who have gone through trauma, one of their coping mechanisms is disassociation. And to be connected and present in your body can feel like a very dangerous thing for a trauma survivor. Throughout our counselling sessions with Donny, we would be going very much at his own pace. It's important for me to tell my clients that this is their healing journey. This is their sessions. I would be establishing goals with them. What is it that they want to get out of therapy? What does Donny want out of therapy? What is he hoping for? What does he want to achieve? We would be going at his pace to achieve that. And throughout our sessions, I would be checking in with him. I'll be making sure that, is this working for you? Do we need to change things up? I would consider myself a holistic counselor in that I love to draw on an array of therapeutic techniques, an array of therapeutic modules, because I understand that what would work for one person might not necessarily work for another person. And so I want to establish that line of communication and feedback with Donny to hear, is this therapeutic approach working? Do we need to change it? And I very much would want to empower Donny, because with his trauma and with his personality type and the way he is in the world, I could very much see that he would be a bit of a yes man, right? Like he would struggle to say no, that something is making him feel uncomfortable. And so I would see these therapy sessions as a way for him to practice speaking up, being assertive, and telling me, like, Sam, this is shit. I don't want to do this. Can we change this? And giving him permission to do that, and also allowing him to see that it's okay and I'm not going to get offended, because what's more important to me is what Donny is getting out of this, that Donny is getting what he needs out of counselling, not what my agenda is, not what I think his goals should be. And this is what frustrates me about the mental health system in Australia. I don't know about the rest of the world, but in Australia, if you go on a mental health plan to see a psychologist, you get 10 sessions. I'm sorry, but for someone like Donny, 10 sessions is not enough. This sort of work takes time. There is so much for Donny to unpack here. His sexuality issues. What happened to the older man? I don't want to say the word. The stalking. All of it. That's a lot, and you cannot unpack that in 10 sessions. You cannot unpack that in a way where he can feel regulated, where he can feel safe and secure in doing that, in doing this healing work. It takes time. It takes time. That's why I love being a counsellor, because I'm not bound by the mental health plan. I'm able to see people for more than 10 sessions. I find that the best work that can happen is when you have those weekly sessions on a more of a long-term basis, because trust and rapport, it takes time, especially when you're someone like Donny, where their trust has been completely broken and burnt. If Donny was my client, one of the therapeutic approaches that I would try with him, and if it resonates with him, and if he feels comfortable, and if it's something that works for him, and by watching Baby Reindeer, I honestly think this therapeutic approach would be absolutely bloody brilliant for him, is using internal family systems, which is essentially parts work therapy. And oh my gosh, I love IFS work. I love it. I want to do so much more training in being an internal family systems therapist, because I resonate with this, and I've seen how powerful parts work therapy is. And I feel like using IFS for Donny would allow him to feel very much safe, and it would allow him to explore these different parts of himself that has happened throughout his life. It would allow him to really work on what happened with the older gentleman, and then to see how that has tied into the way that he relates to Martha Scott and the whole stalking situation, and why he is drawn to Martha, and why he, at the very end of Baby Reindeer, is drawn to going back to this older man. It has frustrated me reading the comments on Facebook, on YouTube, on Reddit, all over the place about how people just don't understand why he would go back to this older man, why he would grieve the end of the stalking relationship with Martha. And look, I get it, they don't have the education about trauma and just how the human psychology works, but God, I wish I could shake some of those people, because that's what can happen. And so if Donny was my client, and if he felt safe in doing this, we would probably be exploring that part of him. And we would be doing that through some sort of a form of meditation. And let me give you an example. So let's just say he has this part of needing validation from this man. We would be looking into, where do you feel this part in your body? Where do you feel it? And by checking in on where he feels it in his body is allowing him to reconnect to his body. Because like I said earlier, people who have gone through trauma, they struggle to connect in with their body. It's a very hard thing to do, and we need to establish safety for them to do that. But let's just say that part of needing the validation from the man, we would go, okay, where do you feel that in your body? And we would stop, we would breathe, would meditate, and would check in. And he might say, feels it in his heart, his chest. And then I would ask, okay, what does it feel like? What does that look like? And he would give me a picture, right? Or like a texture or a color or a sound. And we would really explore that. And the idea is later on, outside of therapy sessions, when he is feeling triggered, like he wants to go back to this man, he's able to check in where he's feeling that in his body, and he'll be able to feel that same sensation, and he'll be able to go, oh, that's my part that needs that validation. We would then ask this part of him, what is your role? What is your positive intention? What are you trying to do? And something will come up in his intuition. Something will come up about like, he makes me feel good, or I don't know. I don't know what would come up for Donny in this case. And we would also be establishing, how old is this part? And this really like sometimes freaks people out when you ask them this about the age. And I always say, just tell me the first thing that comes to your mind. And often it's a younger part. It's like, oh, he's 5 years old. A memory would pop up of what happened at 5 years old. And then as you do that and you draw it out and you draw out the story about this particular part, and you give this part self-compassion, self-love, validation, attention, you're able to see the connection of what happened as that 5-year-old boy to who you are as an adult, and why you are drawn to an abusive man like that. It's all very complex, and it's hard to explain this without using therapeutic jargon, so apologies. But the most important thing I would do if Donny was my client is to listen, is to acknowledge, is to validate, and to hold a space for him where he feels loved, he feels heard, he feels accepted. I could imagine that for someone like Donny, there would be so much shame with what's happened. And shame is a very deep core emotional wounding. But I would let Donny know that he is safe here, and that I hear him, and that healing is available for him. So often for people who've gone through this type of trauma, they feel like they're the only person who's gone through it, who gets it. I would remind Donny that he's not alone, that he really is understood. If Donny was my client, we would be looking at the trauma bonding, and I would be providing psychoeducation on what trauma bonding is. I mentioned it in my previous Baby Reindeer video. I feel like that would be really important for him to get that and to understand that, to help remove some of that shame, and for him to really take a look at like what's really going on here, what's really happening. And that's what I would do if Donny was my client. And probably a whole lot more, let's be honest. It's very hard to go into all of it in this one video. Okay everybody, that's it from me. Thank you so much for sticking to the end and watching this video in all of its entirety. I'm super grateful for you. Give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, leave a comment, do all the things. If you'd like to watch another video from my channel, then I recommend that you give this one a watch next.